So here comes the bumper music. I feel like I'm forgetting to do something. Oh well. Here we go. Welcome to the Silver Happy Hour radio broadcast. I am your host. That squibble, squabble, gobble, gobble you heard in the background is my good friend Robinson. He apparently sounds like tumbling stones. I'm also here with Chaz. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen.
All at once.
Hello, gentlemen.
There we go. Is that a question or a statement?
I missed my cue.
It's all right. That's only the first time that you've missed the cue, though, in almost a year, so I'm actually pretty impressed. You are listening to the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast, streaming to you live on YouTube.com. Also, you might be hearing us on Radio Valencia. Our partners at Radio Valencia, we love them to death. You probably just heard Aaron Eyesore on Ribbon Around a Bomb. And we appreciate the lead-in, Aaron. We hope you had a lovely show. But if it seems a little different, folks, it's because it's only 10 o'clock at night and we are coming to you on YouTube. You can also hear us on 87.9 FM on Radio Valencia, as well as downloading our podcast and subscribing from YouTube. So, did you guys have a nice week? Robinson, how was your week?
My week was pretty eventful. Not in a positive way, but yeah, you know, just a lot of weird stuff happening. But
You know, I get where you're coming from, right? Because not every week is going to be wonderful, right? But I look at it this way. At least you're not dead. So there's always that.
you say that like it's a good thing.
I think it's a good thing. You're my best friend. I would be very sad if you died. Although I have brought myself... I understand that one day you will die. Like I've made peace with that. Just so you know.
That's good.
I'm glad. Chaz, how was your week?
Eventful.
Ooh. What happened?
Stuff. Stuff I'm not allowed to talk about. So,
Oh crap!
Yeah,
you
eventful.
and your HIPAA. You know, I think it's
not
funny
HIPAA.
that.
It's just...
Yeah, well, I call it HIPAA because that's the only like confidentiality term I know.
Yeah.
Never mind. I was gonna say something of whether or not it was a theologically driven confidentiality agreement, but now I'm thinking you might not even remember the joke that we made last week about me not knowing what theology is.
Yeah, you just totally don't.
I do so. I was totally joking, you bastard.
What's it mean?
It's the study of like religion and people's religious beliefs. It's theology.
I'll give you that.
Jesus. Oh, see? Who made the ding? That was like me answering the question, and then it went ding, like you're totally right. That was awesome. I couldn't have timed that any better with my own app. So, Robinson told me earlier today that we were going to have a guest on the show. And I'm not 100% sure if that's going to happen. I'm hearing talking in the background. Is that you, Robinson?
That is you, and I'm trying to turn the volume off.
Got it.
Okay.
I couldn't.
There we go.
I didn't recognize it as myself. I thought maybe there was a robot somewhere. I didn't know that it was me. Which is good because I'm not much of a narcissist, but I'm pretty good at recognizing my own voice. Some people say I like to hear myself speak. I don't quite know what they mean by that. But something tells me it's kind of rude.
There's nothing wrong with liking to hear yourself speak. There's nothing wrong with liking yourself.
I struggled for years to like myself, and then I finally learned how to like myself. And now I think, I can honestly say this, and I mean this sincerely. I've grown to learn to love the person that I am. Good, bad, indifferent, right, wrong, a pain in the ass. I firmly believe that all I can do is try to be a good person, try to make the best decisions that I can in my life, especially with regards to my family and my friends and myself. And I've come to accept that I am who I am, and that I have some really amazing friends in my life who care about me and who I care about deeply. And that's all you need, man. That's it. That's all that matters. And I have my sobriety, which is part of the reason that I think I was ever able to get to that point where I didn't just resent myself. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Mostly.
Absolutely.
Mostly. Fuck you, little bastard. So you do realize that we are a video stream, right, Chaz?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'm just checking because it almost sometimes looks like you think that you and I are just having a long distance relationship via FaceTime, and so you put the cameras close to your face as possible, and you're very just.
This is me
relaxed.
raw and unedited me. This is just who I am.
That's right.
I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna eat. I'm gonna do whatever right here.
Because you know why?
What's up, internet?
Because Chaz has learned how to love himself too. God damn it.
Damn straight.
And if he's gonna eat ramen, and he's gonna show off the plaster holes in his wall to the whole internet, and his grape juice soda,
Fanta.
by golly, he is cool with that. And I respect the hell out of you, man.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. So, what's the status of our guest tonight, Robinson? Because I'm pretty sure...
he's probably passed out. He passes out a lot, and it's not because he has narcolepsy. It's because he has he's on methadone. He's been in recovery for a couple of years now, and it's a struggle for him because he was in really deep, and I got to give him a lot of kudos for staying sober because for a lot of people it's difficult. For him, it was nearly impossible.
Why do you think that is?
Just because he was so in it for so long, and using such a large amount, I guess, and all the time, and I don't know. I haven't really talked to him that much about it, but when I talked to him today, he's also an amazing motorcycle mechanic, and I have a motorcycle, so I went to see him and talked to him about doing some work on my bike. And it occurred to me that he would be great for the radio show. I brought it up to him, and he said, yeah, I got a lot of great stories to tell. I've got messages to tell people. This guy's just a walking, he's a walking case of, everything what not to do. So,
what not to do?
Yeah, what not to do when it comes to drugs. He was a dealer for many years. And any smart dealer, not to say that he's not smart, but any smart dealer who wants to stay in business and make lots of money doesn't do the drugs he sells. He does other drugs.
Well, so it's interesting that you say that, because I firmly believe that a lot of drug addicts become drug dealers because they think that if they buy a bulk of drugs and then sell it at a profit, that they'll be able to do their portion of drugs basically at a wash, right, for free.
Yes.
And
Yes, that's kind of their profit goes into their own stuff.
right.
Yeah.
And
And if they're smart about it, it works. When you're high, it's hard to be smart about it.
correct. Which is why when I decided that I was going to use the drug addict, drug dealer business model for my beef jerky company, I knew that it would be okay because although I do eat quite a bit of the jerky that I make, it's not going to ruin my life. And it's worked pretty well for me for the last couple of years. I keep half the jerky for me. I sell the other half of the jerky, and I still make a profit, but I get all the jerky I can eat for free. That's how it started, at least. Now I make way too much to keep half of it for myself, but I do always keep enough for myself, and then I sell the rest. Works out great.
That's great.
So it was an interesting week. A friend of mine who is in recovery and who I can't say I helped him get sober. That would be disingenuous or an exaggeration at best. But I definitely encouraged him, and he came to me, and we've talked about it on numerous occasions, and he listens to the show. His name is Eric, and he just told me that he is essentially right on the cusp of about being 6 months clean and sober from alcohol, and so I wanted to give him a shout-out. I don't know if he's listening or not, but huge shout-out to my boy Eric for 6 months of sobriety by the time the next episode is going to roll around. So maybe a little bit of an early celebration, but you know what? I say that's okay, because if anything, he wouldn't want my shout-out to be for nothing. So he will stay sober. God damn it.
That's a lot of pressure, man.
I know it is. I'm a bad man.
That's the kind of pressure. That's the kind of pressure that pushes someone to drink.
That's right. Push you over the edge. Just can't take it, man. So I was thinking.
Congratulations, Eric.
Yeah, congratulations, Eric. We
applause or
commend
something.
you. I have applause. Here we go.
Not like clapping.
I don't have that one, Chaz. I'm sorry. We could do this one. 6 months of sobriety. Kudos. Yeah, I gotta find a better small.
Yeah,
group.
you need a better soundboard.
Hey, you watch it. This one was I paid no money for this.
Oh, well, then you got your money's worth.
I am very pleased with my purchase. Was there any? I'm trying to think. Anyone else recently? So I've been on Twitter a lot, and people have been tweeting at us their sobriety birthdays, if you will. Like, I'm 20 days sober today at Sober Happy Hour, or 2 years sober today, Sober Happy Hour, and we always try to reply back and congratulate them, and we love that. We absolutely love that. And I don't know, I feel like it's pretty public. Should we say them on the air? Would that be okay?
Well, I mean, we're not like saying last names or anything, are we?
Unless you have my Twitter handle. My Twitter handle is my first and last name, so I guess.
Well, I mean, we could just use the first names.
That's true. So, I mean, if you're like, Skank Dancer 69, no one's going to know who you are. Well, some people definitely know who you are, but most people won't.
Ooh la la.
And that was the soundboard. Oh, my Lanta. I had an idea. Oh, Robinson, your video is way behind your audio right now. That was
So is
Yeah.
yours.
You were laughing, but your face was just still, and it was really creepy.
I'm looking at you. There's about a 3-second delay.
Yeah, I wonder. It could be my internet because I'm probably still uploading all that audio to Dropbox right now. I don't know. My internet's been weird the last week, where it'll like scream fast, and then an hour later it'll be crawling slow, and then it'll be fast again. And maybe I just need to get Cox out here to look at it or something. But I had an idea. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this.
All right.
Okay.
All right. So every week on the show, I tend to have my little vape pen on me during the show. And a friend of mine actually started this company. They're called Candy Pens. It's a small, battery life is great little vape pen, and you can get attachments so that this one is the liquid tank for the vape juice, but you can also get one that you can burn, dry tobacco, preferably, or one that you can burn wax if you're into that. But I was thinking that Candy Pens, owned by a friend of mine, and I won't say that this friend owes me a favor so much as, well, I won't say anything. Let's just leave it at that. But I was thinking it might be a possible sponsor. If Candy Pens were to sponsor the show, and I could send you a candy pen, Robinson, so that instead of smoking your cigarettes during the show, you could maybe try a candy pen.
That's
instead.
exactly what I need. I would love to get one, and I would love to try it out and talk about it on the show, and every week try a new flavor.
Yeah,
Send me one too, man.
Absolutely. I love it. It has kept me from smoking cigarettes for the last few years now. I use the 0 milligrams of nicotine vape juice, so it's literally just vapor. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, this is a perfect opportunity for this Candy Pens company to get some good visibility. We know we have a lot of viewers. We know we have a lot of listeners. And if we sent them to their website, people would buy them. People who want to quit smoking, addicts who maybe are ready to take that next step into quitting smoking cigarettes, and there's lots of them. It could be a huge opportunity, and then we might be able to get some sponsorship on the show that would help us better our website and promote the show. And once we start getting some legitimate sponsorship and endorsements under our belt, that's when we could potentially start reaching out to some other companies that say, oh, okay, there are companies willing to spend money to support this show. They're taking a risk. We're willing to take that marketing risk as well, and there's clearly been a payoff. So I was thinking about reaching out, but I wanted to get your guys' blessing before I did that. What do you think?
Sure.
Robinson? Oh, my Lord.
Now that's
better.
very.
That is very loud.
That's clapping, yeah.
That's not clapping. That's squealing. Sounds like somebody
That is,
stepped on a baby.
It's an applause.
That was someone stepping on a baby.
Okay.
We just gotta find like a gentle one that's only like a few people in a small room just clapping without screaming. I don't know where to find it. I have a kazoo.
I don't know either.
Would that be helpful? A kazoo? No?
No.
Okay.
No.
Just checking.
That's weird.
That was weird, right?
Yeah.
Well, we'll find one. I'm not too worried about it. Anyway, all right, so good. We have come to an agreement. I'm going to reach out to Candy Pens, and I'm going to see if Candy Pens would like to sponsor the show, because I love my Candy Pen vape pen, And I know that the company's doing really well right now, and they've got a big marketing push going on right now, and it could be the perfect opportunity. So that's on the agenda. That is on my to-do list. Mark it off.
You know, on my last show, I used to give things away
Siri,
to people who
remind me to talk to Candy Pens on Monday.
Okay, I'll remind you.
Thank you. Sorry.
That's a good way to notes. I should do that.
Yep. Maybe we could get Apple to sponsor us next.
Oh yeah.
You sounded so sure of it.
No, actually, I mean, all they can say is no or not respond, but it doesn't hurt to ask.
That's true. It's very true. Okay, so let's pretend for a moment that John is not going to be on the show tonight.
Yeah, let's pretend that.
Okay. What the hell are we going to talk about?
I like the idea that Robinson had earlier.
Did he have an idea? What was your idea?
I don't remember.
It was like something on genetics or something.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
The predisposition of genetics. But I think that was kind of in relationship to John being on the show, right?
Well, not necessarily.
Oh.
But he had mentioned it, and I thought that was a good topic.
So is that because he thinks that he was genetically predisposed to be an addict, or because he thinks he was not?
No, I don't listen to him when he talks. Oh, did I just say that out loud?
I've learned to tune him out.
Yes, you did, right?
Okay. Can we edit that out? No, we can leave that in.
We are live, so
we can edit it out before it ends up on Radio Valencia.
Yeah.
I usually have a couple of minutes that I need to edit out of the Radio Valencia stream, so we'll edit that out. He won't ever watch the YouTube. Come on. He doesn't have internet.
Is anyone watching YouTube right now?
Yeah, there are. Hello, viewers. We have some viewers. Cool. Say hello.
Hello, YouTube viewers.
What's up, YouTube?
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, so from the standpoint of genetics, I'm an idiot.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know anything about it either. But yeah, the theory is that you are born predisposed. Now, like if I look at my family, everybody on my mother's side of the family, except for my mother, was a raging alcoholic, and a lot of them died from alcohol poisoning or alcohol-related deaths or something.
Really?
Yeah, they're all Irish, and Irish are notorious drunks. And on my father's side of the family, there were no drug addicts at all. Now, I'm the fourth child, and I believe the fourth child is generally like 1 out of 4 is the one that doesn't get that recessive or doesn't get the dominant gene. Yeah. So my oldest brother Ken was an alcoholic at 16. My second oldest brother, he had a drug problem for a while, and he cleaned up. He didn't go to any kind of therapy or anything, but he just like cut it off because he was going crazy with it. The brother that's just older than me, he died a heroin addict, and I've never had an addiction. My sister is an alcoholic, so I'm the only one of my siblings that has never had a problem with drugs or alcohol.
So I wonder. So I'm a 4-child family as well, the product of 4 children. Me, my sister, Nicole, my older sister, my younger sister, Jackie, and my youngest sister, Shelly. And I'm the only drug addict in the family. I think that lends to your theory there, Robinson. Or maybe I have it backwards. That they're
I don't know, it's-
genetically predisposed to not be addicts. So I'm the odd man out. Like you, but backwards. Chaz is looking at me like, you are an idiot.
No, all right. Well, I don't know how it works. Do you know how it works, Chaz? You know the whole
Well,
anything about...
I mean, I don't think, just like any other condition with the body or the brain or whatever, it's not just like one gene. It's a whole combination of stuff. I mean, there's like a whole field of study called epigenetics. And that's where you've got, it's kind of like what Robinson was talking about, that predisposed thing. In other words, it's like your environment influences what genes get activated in a sense. So, I mean, you can have that, and in other words, you could be genetically an addict and never have an addiction because you never were exposed to any addictive substances.
So more
Does that
like
make sense?
nature nurture kind of conversation.
Yeah, it's like it's literally both.
Okay.
So
there. Well,
Mhm.
I guess to me, some of the studies, the American Psychological Association, I don't even know if that's a real place, but it's on the internet, so it has to be somewhat true. At least
Because everything on the internet is real.
everything.
They wouldn't put it on there if it wasn't.
Right, I got this article from theonion.com. That's a legitimate news.
Okay.
It says that 100% of people with genes will be addicts. At least half of a person's susceptibility to drug addiction linked to genetic factors. So this was a study from June of 2008, and this was actually presented at a congressional hearing where research around the genetic basis for addiction was presented, and they made recommendations to Congress about ways to incorporate their findings into drug treatment programs. So the American Psychological Association, they asked the Government Relations Office to sit down in front of a committee to discuss the genetic link to addiction. So I guess one of the biggest problems that this topic faces is the need to overcome public misunderstanding regarding genetic testing and kind of this general mistrust or distrust even of genetic testing, because there's been a lot of what Chaz was kind of talking about a couple of weeks ago, bad science around genetic testing, like what we talked about with regards to identical twins and nonsense, essentially. I mean, some of this genetic testing that has been done over the last 30 years or so, it seems like they went out of their way to support their theories with the way that some of this testing was being done. So when it came to this genetic testing around addiction, they really tried hard to clear up some of those misunderstandings. So this was a Harvard University, Massachusetts General Hospital Center on Genetics test, I guess, or study that, according to, I guess, a national survey, but I don't know how many people they were surveying, 5% of primary care physicians feel confident in their ability to interpret genetic tests, and only 4% would feel comfortable suggesting treatment based on genetics, right? So keep in mind, this is from 2008. The idea behind this committee hearing was to try to convince lawmakers that taking genes into consideration would mean potentially less harsh what do you call it?
Sentences?
Not necessarily even sentences, but less harsh laws around people who show a genetic predisposition for addiction and the behavior that they may be presenting, right? So if somebody's been busted for drug use once, then should they just immediately be sent to rehab? Should they go to prison? Should they go to jail? Should they get a slap on the wrist and a fine? But if somebody is just a chronic getting busted for drugs, right? A chronic drug busty. And they're a serial drug abuser getting busted for drugs all the time. You have to kind of stop and think, if this person has experienced all of these negative consequences around their drug use, at some point, if this were just people making bad decisions, I mean, most people who get caught doing something bad and there's a negative repercussion, unless there's something going on up here, they tend to be able to say, okay, that got me in a lot of trouble last time, I'm probably not going to do it again. With the exception of our banking system. Most people think that way. A drug addict can't help themselves. They literally are compelled to continue to break the law and do this thing that has gotten them in trouble so many times because of the way that this addiction has changed the chemicals in their brain and has not only affected them psychologically but also physically. We've talked about this on the show many times, right? The physical addiction combined with the psychological addiction makes the problem twice as complicated to solve. Chaz, you look like you want to say something.
Oh, yeah. Well, then, what about the person who is from the upscale neighborhood, who's not around crime all the time, who is just as much of an addict, but never gets caught simply because, well, there's not as much police scrutiny and maybe not enough opportunities to get caught where they are. They're just as much addicted and everything. They also maybe, I don't know, have less or more intelligence. They could even less, but there simply isn't the opportunity for them to be caught all the time simply because there is not as much heavy police presence where they live.
Sure.
But nevertheless, both people could still be just as easily predisposed to addiction as each other.
Or they can afford lawyers.
There you go.
I think from a legal and from a policy perspective, what you're saying makes total sense. That we see poverty-stricken neighborhoods, minority communities, people of color who are being sentenced to prison for drug-related offenses far more often. I mean, 100% more often, 90% more often, than their white counterparts, middle-class white people, aren't getting thrown in prison for drug offenses. They're getting put in treatment programs, right? I think that's kind of a whole nother conversation, and that's okay. We can kind of go down that rabbit hole a little bit if we want to, but when a majority of our prison population, if we look at the drug-related non-violent offenders, they're in there for relatively minor drug offenses, possession, right? If you're a hardcore drug dealer, you are a menace to society. You are making the problem worse, and you should serve time in prison. If you are caught with drugs for personal use, I truly do not believe that prison is the right way to deal with you. I think we don't treat other illnesses that way. We don't treat other mental illnesses that way. I mean, there are people who get away with brutal murder because of their psychological states of mind. So if somebody is addicted to heroin and gets caught with a pocket full of smack and a syringe, and they end up in prison because it's a class 1 narcotic, and they have more than a tiny little bit. It's because they got paid that day, and they went out and bought all the heroin they could afford. And now they're being thrown in prison for that and treated like a hardened criminal, put in the same prison as people who have raped and murdered and robbed. That to me just seems crazy. That's crazy. And other countries, other established countries don't do that to drug addicts. And they call them, I was about to say other Western or Westernized countries, but that's bullshit. More just modern day industrialized, civilized nations don't do that. But we do.
I was reading up on some laws in Vietnam, and the penalty for possession of heroin is anywhere from life in prison to death.
That's insane.
For possession of heroin.
That's Vietnam.
Any amount. So there are some countries that they make the penalty so harsh that you don't even want to go there.
Well, but it's funny because to me, the first thing that popped into my head was, okay, if I'm a heroin addict and just having the heroin in my possession is enough to get me life in prison, I am almost tempted, I'm almost dared to be a heroin dealer and to have large, copious amounts of heroin in my possession if the penalty is going to be just as stiff for having a kilo of heroin as it would be to having a gram of heroin. If you're going to do it, you're going to take the risk, and the penalty is severe, regardless of how much you have, then shit, I might as well go out with a bang, and if I'm going to get busted, I'm going to get busted for real, but I'm going to try to make some money in the meantime. And that's just my crazy brain and how I think about it. But making the penalty severe like that, for an addict, I'm sorry, if they became addicted to heroin, no penalty is going to stop that person from using heroin. Because the ultimate penalty is hung over your head every single time you use, and that is death. And you do it anyway.
Okay, but if in Vietnam, if you're a dealer, then you're making enough money to pay off the police.
Sure.
To keep you from being caught. Because
Pablo Escobar.
There's a lot of corruption there.
Yeah.
You can kill someone and pay off the cops to bury the evidence if you have the money. So it's the person who is poor that's going to go to prison, not the person who.
And what's funny is we look at Vietnam. Go ahead.
If you're going to be a heroin user, then yeah, definitely make some money at it so you can afford to keep doing it and pay off the cops.
But we think of Vietnam as a third world country, right?
Yes.
Where there's corruption and you can pay off the cops. And if you have money, you don't go to prison for heroin possession. If you're poor, you don't just go to prison, you go to federal pound me in the ass prison and potentially get put to death. That sounds an awful lot like America.
Well, I mean, the statistics I heard, like as far as Arizona goes, Chandler, I think it is one of the most heavily saturated with heroin towns in the U.S. Because it's like a major distribution point. And I'm like, Chandler?
I work in Chandler. I wish you hadn't told me that.
So it's something like, it's not necessarily that there are more drugs in more poverty-stricken areas. It's just that there's more cops.
Maybe. Yeah.
Chandler's an expensive part of town too.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
So you can't afford to buy a house there unless you're a drug dealer.
Bingo.
So part of this APA 2008 genetics, matter, and addiction study, what they were really looking at was genes in relationship to receptors in the brain. So one of these doctors explained that the number of a certain type of dopamine receptor, known as the D2 receptor, might someday be used to predict whether someone will become addicted to alcohol, cocaine, or heroin. That certain brain imaging scans that they've done suggest that people with fewer D2 receptors are more likely to become addicted than those with a lot of these receptors. And how many of these receptors people have is, in part, determined by genetics. So, and it says, so we've talked about this, of course, environmental factors play a role, propensity isn't destiny, but this doctor was talking about this idea that if a person experiments with drugs and they repeatedly use them, college, early 20s, and they have fewer of these D2 receptors, they should theoretically be genetically vulnerable to addiction. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, to put it simply, that makes sense. If I am genetically programmed by my parents and their parents before them, and the pleasure center in the brain is essentially what determines whether or not I will be addicted to something. And granted, I think to your point, Robinson, and my point a couple of weeks ago, my mother never drank alcohol. Therefore, if she has fewer of these D2 dopamine receptors, then it stands to make sense that she never experienced alcoholism or any sort of draw towards alcohol abuse. But if her genetically similar parents with these few dopamine receptors drank and then drank more as they got older and then became alcoholic, that would also make sense. And me, being genetically made from my mother, at least 50%, I could very well have fewer of these D2 dopamine receptors and therefore was vulnerable to becoming addicted to the substances that I became addicted to. I don't know. That makes sense to me. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a geneticist or a theologian. I can only read the study.
Well, one thing I would say is that, yeah, it may be true, but it really doesn't matter at all, given that you have to be exposed to these kind of things. In order to do that, they have to be in the environment.
Sure.
I mean, you can be predisposed all you want. If you live in an environment that is completely lacking in any kind of opioid or any kind of alcohol or addictive substance in particular, you're not going to become an addict.
But who lives in that environment anymore?
Who knows? But
that's the thing.
Nevertheless, if there is nothing to become addicted to that based on those D2 receptors, because there's plenty of like the other things to be addicted to, like certain behaviors or whatnot, which can also cause the dopamine levels to increase with the D2. But anyway, that's besides the point. If there isn't any chance of becoming addicted, it's just simply not going to happen. So the whole sociological aspect of it comes into play.
Yes.
as far as, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't be looking at just genes. We should be looking at the person's, situation. But then again, that's going down the road towards unequal treatment under the law, and that's somewhere I don't think we want to go
Well,
as a
I guess
society.
my thought process is that we live in a society now where drinking is more prevalent than not. I think that's, at least in the United States, I would say, and I have nothing to back this up, but I would say that more people drink alcohol than don't. Therefore, that predisposition, that genetic predisposition to alcoholism puts those people at risk, and they are in an environment where alcohol is not only readily available, but socially acceptable, and in some cultures, it is encouraged. Same goes for, let's be real, heroin-type products. You go to the oral surgeon to have your wisdom teeth removed, and they're giving you hardcore painkillers now. And if you've had a minor procedure done prior to having your wisdom teeth removed, maybe you had a procedure where they prescribed you some wimpy little Vicodin, then they may be more likely to prescribe you heavier or larger doses of Percocet the next time that you have to have something done. Or you get hospitalized for an injury, and you got the little button to self-medicate with the morphine every 20 minutes. And for someone who may be genetically predisposed to addiction, that could be all that it takes, man. Honestly. So, I don't know, but I find the whole conversation very interesting, because I agree with what you're saying, Chaz, but we don't live in a society where it is more likely that you're not exposed to those substances. I believe that we live in a society where you are more likely to be exposed to drugs and alcohol, especially now. The younger generation, I've looked at, I think we even talked about one of these studies that I read on one of these shows, where the percentage of people that have used what they consider to be hardcore drugs, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, has increased steadily in college-aged kids over time, over the last 30 years. Pot was very popular, and then much heavier drugs became more and more and more and more popular. And alcohol, you talk to college kids, unless they're taking the survey at BYU, and it's somewhere in like the 85 percentile of college-age students at universities and colleges who are drinking.
Well, I guess the point I was really trying to make is that if we focus too much on science often, it really tends to try and get us off the hook of the social responsibilities for it. In other words, if we can just say it's all science, and then just react to that, well, where's the motivation to clean up neighborhoods? Where's the motivation to help reduce crime and reduce the availability of drugs? Where's the responsibility to society in that? If all you have is science, that's all you need. So I think that our over-reliance on just science does us a great disservice, because it gets us off the hook.
Very well said.
Hmm.
I
And there's also something to be said about statistics.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Statistics for the purpose of the presentation are almost always altered for the presentation. For a great example, one of my favorite examples of how statistics works is there's a lot of information, but what information you present is going to prove your case. So if I were to say that 80% of the people who eat oatmeal every day die within a year, that's a true statistic. That doesn't mean oatmeal's bad. That just means that we're not given enough information to know why. And the truth is that people who eat oatmeal every day are usually like in their 80s and they can't digest anything else. And they're going to die anyway. But that's how the statistic works.
Sure.
So.
And I think that the interesting part of this genetic conversation is, I guess, almost, I don't know, I look at it from a parenting perspective. It reminds me of friends growing up. I don't know if you had any friends like this, but I had friends growing up who, by the time they were, 12, 13, 14 years old, the age where you tend to experiment with maybe cigarettes or alcohol for the first time, I had friends who had been told by their parents from a very early age that they were allergic to cigarettes because they had, they were allergic to the smoke of cigarettes, and it would make them unable to breathe, or they would have an asthma attack and die or something. And they were thoroughly convinced that this was accurate, and it kept them away from sneaking these stolen cigarettes that we got from the 7-Eleven at age 12. Now, that can only work for so long, I assume, right? But telling your kid falsely that they're allergic to cigarettes, and it would be very dangerous if you smoked a cigarette because of your lung condition, and if you smoke a cigarette, you're putting yourself at risk. And it seemed like a deterrent that worked pretty well for these kids when I was younger. I think about it now and I say, that was probably bullshit. Their parents were probably lying to them. But if I know, and I do know, that my sons could be genetically predisposed to addiction, I probably will try and talk to them and communicate with them on a human level as they get older to explain to them why fiddling around with these types of drugs or with alcohol could be detrimental. But I think parents fear these conversations, especially parents who maybe had problems with addiction or made bad decisions when they were drinking or whatever, and they don't want to tell these stories to their kids because they're ashamed, or they don't want their kids to see it as a free pass to make bad decisions. To me, I look at it as a responsibility to share this with my children and to let them know, hey, you got some fucked up genes in there potentially, and if you start fiddling around with that kind of shit, you could find yourself in a really bad situation, and perhaps they make a better decision than I made.
You could also take your kids on a field trip to Skid Row.
That doesn't work, though.
Just to let them see the side effects of what happens when you become an alcoholic. It does work.
But here's the thing, though, Robinson, is they do these Scared Straight programs, and I personally, I saw my alcoholic uncle when I was growing up, and what a piece of shit he is, and how angry and aggressive and abusive and awful he would become when he would drink. Right? I had the friend of ours, the heroin junkie, before I started on my road to opioid addiction. I saw him. I still forget his name. What the fuck was his name? The dude that we hired to help us with the car and stuff. That
I don't remember.
I think
Doug. We'll call him Doug.
I thought it was like Mitch, but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay.
But I saw him. I saw the abscess wounds in his arms, the shooting up of heroin between his toes because he had nothing but collapsed veins all over himself. This lifestyle that he led where he would literally do hours worth of mechanic work on a car for a $20 hit of heroin. That was his payment. And that we could never get a hold of him on his cell phone because every day his Mexican drug dealer would take his cell phone as collateral at the beginning of the day to give him his drugs, and then, all right, I'm taking your phone, and if you don't get me my $20 by 3 o'clock, the phone's mine. So we couldn't get a hold of him until after 3 o'clock every day. I saw this firsthand, and it didn't deter me at all, apparently. Chaz.
One thing. Let's hypothetical position here. Let's say that one of your children tested positive for a predisposition to addiction. The other one doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Which one gets the talking to?
Well, that's the thing. To me, the genetic
Would you
side
want
of it,
either of them doing this, in other words?
No, but I think that's
in
the
other
thing.
words,
It's more of an awareness thing.
Why take the extra precaution with one? You don't want either of your children turning into junkies.
I guess it's more around the honesty, where the kids that I grew up with who were told by their parents that they were allergic to cigarettes were being lied to. Whereas,
but heroin's pretty addictive stuff.
Yeah,
you're gonna get addicted to it. I mean, it's not necessarily a question of genetics when it comes to that kind of thing.
Robinson,
you don't have to make up anything for telling kids that.
Robinson, I'm going to ask you a question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. Have you used heroin?
Yes, I have.
Have you ever been addicted to heroin?
Never.
Have you used heroin on more than one occasion?
Yes, I have.
So
I've used heroin for... I made a rule for myself to never use heroin more than 2 days in a row.
Okay.
And I only experimented with it for a few months, but during that time, I could very vividly recall my life as a child and seeing my older siblings and their friends becoming addicts and remembering them saying things like, to me, if you're going to do this, try it once, but don't do it twice. If you do it twice, be very careful. If you do it a third time, you're fucked, because if you do it a third time, you have to do it a fourth. Your body is not going to say, no, I don't want it anymore. Your body's going to make you do it whether you like it or not. So I took that advice. And I wasn't scared straight by, police programs or parents. I just saw what happened, and I saw people ODing around me, my brother's friends, and getting thrown in jail or in the hospital or even dying. I just saw it, and that was enough to make me say, you know what? Nothing. I'm not going to touch it. And I didn't touch any drugs until I was 45 years old. And it was only then that I felt comfortable enough with myself that I could experiment, because I wanted to know what it was that everyone else was experiencing. So I did it in small amounts. I got to feel the sensation. Now I know I don't need to do it again.
So, I don't know. Chaz. I don't know if what you're saying is necessarily accurate to everyone. That if you're going to use heroin, you're going to get addicted. I hear people say that all the time. And I have to stop and wonder, if I were a different person with different genes, would it have made a difference? I don't know. But the question about if there were a test, right? If there were a genetic test that I could do to determine whether or not either one of my kids was genetically programmed to be an addict, would I have the conversation with one and not the other? Of course not. I'd have the conversation with both of them. But it's not even so much about the test. To me, it's more about the understanding as to whether or not this whole genetic conversation has any truth to it at all. Because if it doesn't, then it's a bullshit conversation. But if it does, then to me there's more validity to it. There's no more truth to it, where I'm having a conversation where I can say, look, this is not a you're allergic to cigarettes conversation. This is a you have my genes in your body, which means that you are more likely to become an addict than if you did not. I guess that's kind of my point. And it changes the conversation to me.
Tell your kids that you've done this test and tell them that one of them is genetically disposed. Don't tell them which one. And tell them that they have to keep an eye on each other.
Yeah.
And if one of them sees the other one becoming an alcoholic or a drug addict, that they need to be there to help them before it gets out of hand.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. Don't tell them.
That's it.
Well,
we can end the episode right there.
You weren't with me the first time I took Sabina to Mexico.
No.
She, had never had alcohol before. She was 13 years old. We took a trip to Mexico and went to a bar, and nobody questioned her. They just served her a bunch of margaritas, and she got shit-faced drunk and threw up and had to walk back across the border with vomit all over her, and decided at that point that she didn't like alcohol. And, she doesn't drink. She doesn't drink to the point of abuse. And right. You were with me the first time she smoked weed.
Oh, I was. I was with her.
You were with us, and I don't know how much she smoked, but
between the two of us, Robinson, we smoked way too much. And I was a super lightweight at the time in terms of pot, that I had only smoked pot like once or twice in my whole life prior to that. But for some reason, I was charged with making sure Sabina, her first time trying pot, would be a safe experience for her. So for some reason, to me, that meant, well, okay, then I have to do the brunt of the pot smoking, and then she can have the leftovers. And I was the one who ended up retarded, and she was the one kind of not knowing what the hell was going on. And she definitely smoked too much. Don't get me wrong. She was freaking out, but I was like beside myself freaking out. I literally thought I was going to die. And it's one of the funniest stories to tell now, looking back on it. But at the time, it was awful. It was terrible. I literally thought I was dying. And here I was supposed to be taking care of this teenage girl.
It's one of my favorite, funniest moments with you, I gotta say.
It's completely absurd. Completely absurd.
I don't know if we've told the story, if you've told the story on the show, but I think this is worthy of it.
I can tell the story. I'm happy to tell the story.
Tell the story.
But what I think we should do first is take a break.
Okay.
And then I will tell the story when we come back with the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. I will tell the story about the time that I smoked way too much pot with Robinson's daughter, Sabina. I hadn't chosen a song to play yet, so I'm going to choose one now. And, don't want to do that. That would be bad. But I would like to tell everybody that they can go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/soberhappyhour. They can follow us on Twitter @soberhappyhour. They can shoot us an email at soberhappyhour@gmail.com. You can post a comment on the YouTube when it posts. You can post a comment on the podcast when it posts. We really appreciate you subscribing to the podcast and reviewing and rating the podcast and leaving your comments. We do appreciate all of your feedback, and we take it all into consideration. If there's a topic that you want to hear us discuss, if there's a guest that you'd like us to have on, or if you yourself are a recovering addict that would like to be on the show, or somebody that is involved in addiction recovery and sobriety, we'd love to have you on the show. So reach out to us. We are on YouTube every Saturday night from 10 p.m. to midnight, and then immediately following the YouTube broadcast, you can catch a repeat of the week before on Radio Valencia. Radio Valencia is getting a pre-recorded version of the show. YouTube gets the live version, so if you want all the bloopers and the weirdness and the behind-the-scenes kind of stuff, you should subscribe to the YouTube page as well. I'm going to play a little song for you. It's an oldie but a goodie. And then when we come back on the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast, I will tell the story in my own words about the infamous time that I smoked way too much pot with Sabina, Robinson's daughter. It was her very first time, and I was asked to show her the ropes. Probably looking back on it, Robinson regrets that decision. I would too. And I do regret the decision that I made to be a part of that. But it's a funny story, and it's coming up after this. Enjoy this song. It's called Today. We'll be back on the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. Live on YouTube.
Come again, I never hear you, 'cause the wind, it blows right through into the phone. But I give to just be near you, never have to spend another night alone. Still I'm waiting for the day you come back home, with a longing heart that's turning into stone. I can't wait to feel your breath upon my face, followed by your lips that taste like the sweetest candy I have ever known. And you know how sweet it gets when we're alone. I can't wait to feel you each and every day. Today. Try my best and I just need you for the things I know you never wanna give. When you're here I can't be near you, 'cause I want you so, so badly as I did. Still I'm waiting for the day you come back home, with a longing heart that's turning into stone. I can't wait to feel your breath upon my face, followed by your lips that taste like the sweetest candy I have ever known. And you know how sweet it gets when we're alone. I can't wait to feel you each and every day. Today. your breath upon my face, followed by your lips that taste like the sweetest candy I have ever known. And you know how sweet it gets when we're alone. I can't wait to feel you each and every day. Did I mention that's today? So day, have I told you that's today?
Welcome back to the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. I am your host. I'm sorry?
Turn on your camera.
I will. Hold on. I gotta
Okay.
I promise. I'm trying to do like 4 things at once. See, I only have so many fingers, Robinson.
Oh, you got 10 fingers. That's enough.
I need a prehensile tail. That would help.
Okay.
You know what I really need? A producer. That would be quite helpful. And a fluffer. That would be nice. That'd be nice. Maybe when we get a little bit bigger, we could have a producer.
Did you say a fluffer?
I did. I did say a fluffer. All right, what the hell's going on? How come you guys aren't popping on the screen?
I'm right here. Am I?
Yeah, oh, there you are. Okay, good. All right. So, Robinson.
Yes.
Will you set up our story, please?
Okay. So I think Sabina was 15 or 16 years old.
I think about 16.
And I had come down from San Francisco to meet you. I went and picked her up. I really don't even remember if it was premeditated or God, it's been so long, I really don't remember all the details, but I just know that we went to your house and you, I asked if she wanted to try pot, and she was willing to give it a shot, and I told her if you wanted, I told her before, if you ever want to do any drugs, let me know, and I'll be around so you can try it in a safe environment. And she had asked me about it, so I just kind of made arrangements.
Yeah.
To do it at your place. I didn't know that you had not smoked pot only a couple of times. I thought, that you were like all the other hip kids, and you had some experience with it. And I trusted you more than anyone. And she has always felt like, you're part of the family. And yeah, I just thought it would be good. You guys were much closer in age, and
sure.
Yeah. So.
Well, so you came down, and I think what had happened was it may have actually been the very first evening that I had ever tried pot. But prior to you coming into town, and I might be making this part of the story up, would have been when I had tried it for the very first time, but in a very small quantity. So with that, then you coming into town and asking, hey, would you be willing to help Sabina out with this? And I said, sure, I've done this before. I'm an expert. And I don't even remember who we got it from. All I remember was that there was this little red, I guess you would call it a bong. I don't know, I'm not that hip to pot terms. I really don't like smoking pot. I am bad at smoking pot. And I've probably still, to this day, have only ever tried it maybe 5 or 6 times total in my life. That time being one of them. And whoa, sounded like there's a monster in my studio. That was weird. So, of course, being asked by my very good friend, hey, would you do this for me? Sabina wants to try, smoking pot, and I want her to be in a safe place, and I figure your house is just as safe as mine, so let's let her try it. So a friend of ours who was there, we had a handful of friends over like we always did when Robinson would come to town, because everybody likes hanging out when Robinson's hanging out because we always have a good time. And so we had a nice little bit of some good pot. I don't even know if it was good pot. It might have been shit pot, but either way, I didn't know the difference. And I'm pretty sure my friend Mitch was in town. And I'm pretty sure that it was his pot. Because Mitch,
yes, it was.
To this day, Mitch is an extraordinary pothead. And so it was his pot. It was like Seattle, Washington pot, which at the time was probably the best pot you could get. And probably still is.
I think it was from Humboldt.
It might have been from Humboldt. You might be totally right. And so we take this pot and we put it into this little pipe, and I take a little bit, and then Sabina takes a little bit, and then I take a little bit more, and then Sabina takes a little bit more. And Sabina, being the good girl that she is, after that little second bit more, she says, "All right, I'm good. I get it. I feel what I feel. I'm good. Thank you very much." But of course, in my frugality and growing up in a Peruvian household, you don't let things go to waste, my friend.
Pot's not going to smoke itself.
This pot is not going to smoke itself, and you will smoke it until that bowl is clean, sir. And that's what I did.
Children are starving in Korea. You have to clean your plate.
There are children in Somalia with no access to pot. So you need to smoke all of it. So that's what I did, and I finished what was left in the, which, to my great friend Mitch, the stoner, the amount of pot left in this vessel was not very much. He could have smoked 5 times that much and been fine. But this was like my first or second time ever trying pot, and so I asked him, "Is this all right?" "Yeah, of course. Yeah, no problem." So I smoke the rest of this pot. Sabina's now sitting out on the balcony on a chair, just staring off into space. And I'm looking at her going like, yeah, I want to get there. So I smoke a little bit more, and I smoke a little bit more, and I smoke a little bit more, and I finish what was left. And it takes a little while for this to catch up to me. But it does. And it catches up to me hard. To the point where I feel myself being really uncomfortable, and my heart is racing, and I can't sit still. Like I'm kind of all over the place thinking like, all right, I think I even remember probably changing the DVD that we were watching, like 4 or 5 or 6 different DVDs. Like, nope, all right, watch that one for 2 minutes. Nope, time to switch it. Watch that one for 2 minutes. I don't want to watch that either. Switch it. And then I start to feel a little panicky. And it's probably what most people consider paranoia. But I started to get panicky. Like, okay, something is very wrong here. And I tell Robinson, and I see Sabina, she's still kind of sitting catatonic. But I tell Robinson, I need to go to sleep, man. Like, I need to go to bed. I need to sleep this off. This is bad news. I don't feel okay. I'm gonna go to sleep.
Now, bear in mind, from my perspective, you looked completely normal. You didn't look high at all.
Right. And actually, keep that in mind, because that comes a little bit later as well. So I decide that I'm going to go sleep it off. So I go to my room. I lay down in my bed. And I'm laying down in my bed, probably, 20, 30 minutes. But I'm staring at the clock, hoping to fall asleep. Just let me fall asleep. I don't like this. I feel dizzy. I feel gross. I feel kind of sick to my stomach. Let me fall asleep, and I'll wake up in the morning, and I'll be fine. But I'm looking at this clock, and I'm staring at this clock for what feels like the better part of an hour. And then I really start to panic because I realize that the numbers on the clock are no longer changing with the time. So it's 10:46 when I go into the room, and then it is still on the clock 10:46 when I leave the room. So I walk out of the room, and I walk up to Robinson, and I am in a panic, and I say, Robinson, I don't know what is going on right now, but I'm not sure if there's something really wrong, but I have been in that room for at least 30 or 45 minutes, and the numbers on the clock won't change. The numbers on the clock are stuck. Time is frozen, and I don't know what to do. And Robinson goes, no way. And I'm like, yes way. The numbers on the clock haven't changed. And you've been in there for, 30, 45 minutes. I'm like, exactly, Robinson. And the numbers on the clock haven't changed. And he says to me, I think I figured it out. I'm like, oh, thank God, somebody has. Maybe that's because you've been in there for 45 seconds, you idiot. What is the matter with you? You haven't been in there for 45 minutes. You've been in there for less than 1 minute. Of course the clock numbers haven't changed. You're an idiot. Sit down. You're pissing me off. And I said, no, shut up, okay, whatever.
And walked out.
Yeah, I walked into the room, I laid down, I got up, I walked out, and I said, I'm freaking out. Right?
Less than a minute.
Less than a minute. So then I say,
Wow.
okay. Then I really start to panic because I'm just frustrated because I think Robinson, as he's done before in my life, let's be real, I think he's fucking with me, right? Something's truly wrong, but he's playing it off like it's no big deal in true Robinson fashion. So then I start to get a little panicked, and I feel my heart is racing. Not knowing then what I know now, that I may very well have been suffering from a tachycardia episode that I have. I have a tachycardia in my heart, so I could have actually been just having an episode of tachycardia that I didn't know what it was back then. So I asked Robinson to feel my chest. I'm like, Robinson, I think there's something really wrong. I think there's something wrong with my heart. I think I'm having a heart attack. My heart is racing. Will you please feel my heart? So I grab his hand and I put it on my chest, and he feels it. And all he says was, again, in Robinson's wonderful way, he just looks at me and goes, oh my God! And I go, what? What is it? Oh my God! And he goes, sit down. You are freaking yourself out. You are fine. I promise. Sit down. So I sit down. And then we turn on another DVD. I believe it was Super Troopers. And we start watching Super Troopers. And then things mellow out. And then at that point, I'm through the panic phase of it. But I'm still very stoned. So then I realize it's getting later. And I come to the realization that my roommate will be home soon. And as far as my roommate knows, I do not do drugs. I don't even drink alcohol. I don't even smoke cigarettes. I was straight edge at the time. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, my roommate's going to come home and he's going to see me like this, and I'm not going to know how to explain myself. He's going to be really upset with me. And so I tell Robinson, I tell Sabina, I tell Mitch, I tell everybody who's there, I'm like, you guys, when he comes home, you cannot tell him that this happened. This did not take place. Because I thought, for whatever reason, my paranoid mind, that he would be mad. He'd be angry. So he gets home. And this is where it was important what Robinson said earlier about how I looked totally normal. I didn't have red eyes, didn't look stoned, nothing, but I looked totally normal. But to me, I didn't want to be found out by my roommate. So he comes home. He walks in, and I remember sitting in the corner of the couch with my arms kind of folded, leaning over the couch to watch the movie, and I'm just staring at the TV. And he walks in the front door, and he closes the door. And I remember thinking, all right, don't look stoned, don't look stoned, don't look stoned, don't look stoned. And then he walks in, he goes, "Hey guys," and I just really quickly go, "What's up, man? Don't look stoned. Don't look stoned. Don't look stoned." And then he's like, "Oh, hey, what's up, Robinson? How's it going?" "Oh, they're pretty good, yeah." "Oh, when did you guys get into town?" "Oh, just, a couple hours ago." "Oh, right on. How long are you going to be here?" Whatever, little, shooting the shit. Casual conversation. And I'm just thinking the whole time, he knows, he fucking knows, he totally knows. Don't look stoned, don't look stoned. What am I going to do? What am I going to say? So then I just look up at him, and he's looking at me like, "Are you all right?" And I look up at him really slowly, and I remember this very vividly. And I look over at him, and I go, "I'm really stoned right now." And he just starts laughing, and I'm like, "Oh, thank God he's not angry," but I'm freaking out in my mind that he's going to be so mad. And then Mitch packs him a bowl, and he starts smoking pot too. So now everybody's stoned, including Sabina, who's finally out of her catatonic phase, and she's a little bit more animated at this point. But the last part of it that I truly remember is the part where I go back into my bathroom for some reason, probably to use the restroom, and I come out. And the last thing that I remember about this situation, the last ridiculous thing that I remember, was coming out of the room, stopping at the end of the hallway where you could see the whole living room and everybody in there, stopping, looking around, and then deciding in my mind that I couldn't move my feet anymore. That I was stuck to the floor. I was literally stuck to the floor. And at first it was funny, and I'm going, "Oh my God, guys, like, I can't move my feet. I'm stuck to the floor right now. I totally feel stuck. I can't even move my feet. I'm stuck to the floor. What am I going to do?" And then Robinson, of course, being Robinson, being the stone cold sober one, is like, "You're being an idiot again. You're bothering me. Sit down." And I say, I can't. I'm stuck. I'm stuck to the floor. I can't move. I'm stuck here now, and I hope it's not forever. Thanks for caring. And for what felt like 15 minutes, I felt like I could not move from the spot that I was in, and my feet were glued to the floor, until I'm pretty sure that my roommate came and like shoved me over, and I was fine. But this was my experience with marijuana. It's funny now, but at the time, it was ridiculous. It was completely ridiculous and completely absurd. But the worst part, Chaz and Robinson, the absolute worst part, the half-dozen times that I have ever smoked marijuana, and why I do not smoke marijuana to this day, and why I will not recommend the smoking of marijuana to other human beings, is this one piece of information. And I'm going to tell you this, and I am both embarrassed and ashamed of this fact, but I'm going to share it as a public service. Every single time that I smoke pot, this guy right here, your humble host, every time that I smoke pot, after a short period of time, I become thoroughly convinced, 100% convinced, in my own mind, that I have pissed my pants. And
I think you've told this story before, part.
Within minutes of me realizing that I have pissed myself, which I have not, mind you. Never once has it actually happened that I have wet my pants while high on marijuana. This is just in my mind. But every single time I have the sensation and I am convinced that I have pissed in my pants, and then it gets to the point where I am so paranoid about the fact that I think I've pissed myself that I will start reaching for the hands of my friends to feel my crotch area to tell me for certain whether or not I have pissed myself. And this pisses people off. Other men do not like their hands being grabbed and placed on your genitals to determine whether there is urine on your pants. They don't appreciate it at all. So, my PSA to the world and the listeners of this show, don't smoke pot or you will piss yourself and your friends will hate you. Because you are not fun to hang out with, you are obnoxious and annoying, and you make them touch your penis. So don't do it. Don't smoke pot. It's not worth it. Not worth it. And of course, I smoked pot a couple times after that situation, and my brilliant friend Mitch decided that, like, the third or fourth time I had ever tried to smoke pot, he convinced me, once again, Mitch, my good friend, really looking out for me, like he did that night. Yeah, finish the rest of the whole bong load. Convinces me one time, after months of not having smoked pot because I didn't like how it made me feel, and I certainly didn't like the fact that I thought I pissed myself, he convinces me that I should take a hit off of a 5-foot acrylic bong. And I have never been so sick in all my life. 5 foot. This is for, like, hardcore stoners that can hit off a 5-foot bong, and they get wrecked. I thought I was dead. For real this time. So, that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it.
I recall that when you came out of the bedroom and you thought you were dead.
Yeah.
And you asked when you put your hand on my chest, and I said, "Oh my God."
Yeah.
I remember saying, "You are dead. You have no heartbeat. You're dead."
So, I see, and I don't remember the story that well because I was stoned. This could all be made up. None of this might have ever happened. I don't even know. This could have been a story that I told myself while I was dead. So
yeah,
I know that we make light of the fact that drugs can be funny, drinking drunk assholes can be humorous and fun to laugh at, and that, hey, I'll be the first to admit, some drugs are fucking amazing, right? Taking certain drugs, you feel like $1 million. But here's the problem. If you're like me, and you alter your state of mind with drugs, you don't want to come down from that. You don't want to be without that, and so you will continue to use those drugs and continue to use those drugs and keep searching for that high until you're doing it every day. You're doing it every hour of every day. And you are hiding it from the people that care about you. And you are spending money that you don't have. And you are choosing the drugs or the alcohol over the other important and fulfilling things in your life. There are a lot of people who make the argument that pot is not addictive. What are your thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Well, I just want to talk at least about at least part of my experience with pot is that I only smoke it maybe about once every 4 or 5 years, and every time I do, I'm reminded exactly why I don't.
It's only on the blood moon that Chaz smokes pot. Once a year, blood moon has to be a leap year. Chaz smokes pot.
No, I've always found that, I don't know, for some reason to me, altered states of mind have never been a pleasant experience. It's kind of like whenever I get into one, I just cannot get out of it fast enough.
That's why I won't do acid.
So
that's why I never did. I don't like not being in control, and the idea of hallucinating scares the shit out of me.
That's exactly what I was about to say. There's an old saying, people who can't handle reality, or drugs are for people who can't handle reality, and reality is for people who can't handle drugs.
Yeah.
And if you're a person who has to be in a different state and that's why you're smoking weed. You wake up in the morning, you just can't deal with anything until you have that bong hit or your joint or whatever it is. Then that might be a temporary solution, but you need to ask yourself why. What is it about reality that makes you not want to be there and go and hide and be somewhere? What makes you need to be in a different state? What is so fucked up about reality that you can't deal with it? And you need to grow some balls or get some therapy, one or the other. Because
I had myself convinced when I was using that the music that I wrote when I was using was far superior to the music that I wrote when I was sober, before and after. And I had my addicted mind had me convinced that that was true. And I know now that it wasn't true, because what was really interesting about writing music for me is that it's not just cathartic. It actually kind of takes me out of myself when I'm like truly writing music. And so even whether or not I was high or drunk or stone cold sober, I think my brain goes to the same place. And the physical state of where I'm at doesn't really matter, because I listen to the music from then and now and before then, and it's the same. And there isn't a significant difference there. But for a long period of time, I didn't write after I got sober, because I had convinced myself that I only did my best writing when I was altered. So that is an argument that a lot of artists make, where I have to get stoned, I have to get high, I have to get drunk before I can create. And I challenge that perspective, because I just don't think it's true. I simply don't believe that to be accurate. I think if the creativity is inside of you, it comes from a place untouched by those chemicals. Because you can look at somebody like Steve Jobs, who says that maybe he would have never created Apple if it hadn't been for his experiences with LSD. But I believe that he may not have ever created Apple if it weren't for his experiences with LSD, not because of the LSD, but because of the spiritual journeys that he went on after using LSD. He didn't take LSD and then come up with Apple during a trip. He took LSD that then got him into this counterculture, which then took him to India, which then got him involved in Buddhism, and then spirituality, which then resulted in him figuring out who he was as a human being and what he wanted to do, and then this is where he created it from. So to associate the two, to me, seems both like a misinterpretation of what he meant and also a bit disingenuous.
yeah, according to Buddhism, when you experience something like LSD that gives you an awareness that you don't normally have in everyday life, or DMT, which just takes you to a whole different world, uh, um, it's one of those things where once you've experienced it once, that's it. You're there. You don't
Right.
have to keep going back there. You're not going to experience it again and be anything different. You've already experienced it. Anything after that is just recreational. You can only have that spiritual awakening one time.
That's why for me,
And if you
speaking
keep-
of all,
If you keep taking it, then you obviously didn't have a spiritual awakening.
Right. Absolutely. You're
like
saying
for me, as far as altered states and everything else goes, going out of reality, it's not as though it's psychosis or delusion or some kind of fabrication or just not being real. To me, it's actually something like another place entirely. And that's certainly what it feels like when you are literally there. And again, it's never been a pleasant experience for me. considering that it can happen sometimes, let's say, for instance, that I just, CVS runs out of my medication, for instance, and I go 2 or 3 days without it, and yeah, I'm not in reality anymore.
That should be illegal.
I like being in reality. Reality is awesome. Reality is awesome, let me tell you that. It wasn't until after I actually got on medication that I was able to read and write again. It's like not being here was a major obstacle to any kind of creativity happening. I know a lot of people said, medication and whatnot, it kills our creativity, but this one, well, at least in my case, it allowed me to tap into the creativity that's already there. It's just, that's who I am. That's part of me. It's not something that is part of some brain state or anything. It's just a part of me.
I learned something interesting when, back in the early 90s, I was in a band with a guy who, he was a heroin junkie for a long time, and he would use heroin to write songs because it put him in that state where he would be able to tap into his creativity, and he would write songs and sell the songs to song brokers. Believe it or not, there are song brokers who go out in Hollywood and they look for junkies and they sell, they buy songs with heroin.
Seriously?
Absolutely. So they find the junkies who have that ability to tap into that creativity with heroin, and they say, here's a little bit of heroin, write me some songs and I will give you some more. And this guy was one of those people who just needed his heroin, and he would write amazing songs and he would sell them to this guy, and these are songs that ended up on the charts, with bands like Cinderella, or Razzmatazz. Back in the 80s, or back in the late 80s, early 90s, these were top billing bands, and he never got any credits,
of course not,
for writing the song, because he was just a junkie on the street that sold this, wrote a song and sold it, and there's actually a whole market out there for that.
Well, and it reminds me of the really sad story of Elliott Smith. And Elliott Smith was, to be a little bit mean, he wasn't nearly as great as people like to say that he was in terms of a songwriter or a guitar player or recording artist or performer. But there was something very special about the music that he wrote, and it came from, you could tell it just came from this place inside of him that I don't think he even fully understood. And it was very dark, and it was very depressing. And people connect with that kind of music.
Yes, it was very real.
It was very real. And the poor guy suffered from a pretty hideous heroin addiction for quite a long time. And also a very tumultuous relationship with a woman. And Elliott Smith ended up dying very tragically from what nobody's fully sure whether or not the official story is that he died from self-inflicted stab wounds to his chest. Multiple stab wounds. Self-inflicted. Seems a little strange.
Very difficult to do.
Right. I could maybe see you stabbing yourself once in the chest, but 3 times? That's hardcore shit, man.
Easier ways to.
Sure. Well, and if you're a heroin junkie, the easiest way is to just take too much, right? And stab yourself in the chest. So things were looking up for Elliott Smith. He was in the dumps. He had a career that was up and down and up and down, and he got to the point where his heroin use was so bad that he was desperate for money, so he would book shows and sell tickets to these venues, and then he would get to the show, and instead of canceling the show, having to refund all of this money, he would try to perform the show. but he was shooting up into his arms so badly that he could barely play guitar anymore. And people ended up requesting refunds anyway because it was just this mess of a show. He couldn't remember the words to the songs. He was almost like nodding off in the middle of the show. He would leave the stage for periods of time to go get high and then come back and try to perform more, and canceled legs of tours because, oh, I have an injury in my arm, but everybody knew it was because he couldn't play guitar. Same thing happened to Lane, what was his name? Lane Staley? Lane from Alice in Chains?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Lane Staley?
Yeah.
Something like that? Where
Stanley, yeah.
where he was so messed up that he was canceling shows and making up stories about illnesses when it was really that he couldn't be seen in public in the condition that he was in. But with Elliott Smith, the reason that it reminded me of that was that there is a long-standing conspiracy theory that his girlfriend, who was essentially considered his power of attorney, his next of kin, she was his manager in charge of his music, he started to get cleaned up. So her control over him was waning. She wasn't able to control him as much. She wasn't able to make his business decisions and pocket the money and keep him high, which was all he cared about. Here's rent is paid. Here's your drug money. Keep writing the songs. And everybody assumes that she was pocketing the cash and the royalties and everything else. They were, what do you call it, common law husband and wife. They had a common law marriage because of how long they had lived together in California. So when he started getting cleaned up and started taking charge of his life again, then all of a sudden he was in the middle of recording a new album and he wanted to break up. They went through a period where they were separated, and then out of nowhere he's dead. And her story is that he had started using again and that he was so messed up about the fact that he had relapsed for the umpteenth time that he wanted to end his life and stabbed himself with a kitchen knife 3 times to kill himself. And she ended up becoming very wealthy from this for a period of time until Elliott Smith's family ended up getting involved in filing a lawsuit and took control back of his estate and his music and the rights to his songs. And she got nothing. So in the end, she ended up with nothing, and the family got all the rights back, and nobody really knows what happened. But that's how fucked up an addiction like that can be, to the point where you have this talent and you have this person who could have been, to this day, more than likely a very successful indie, singer-songwriter type.
Sober indie.
Right. And yet his life ended very early in his early 30s because of this addiction to drugs. Now, it may not have been the direct result of his drug addiction, but drugs played a huge part in it, because if he had stayed one of those Skid Row junkie artists essentially selling his music for heroin, things might have continued that way for years longer. But because he finally took matters into his own hands and got cleaned up, and this freaked out his moocher girlfriend, he's dead. And that's very sad.
So let that be a lesson.
That's right. If you're a junkie, be single. Well, look at Kurt Cobain. Same kind of situation. Cobain. People think the same thing about Kurt Cobain and what's her face?
Courtney Love.
Courtney Love, yeah, that she killed him because he was cleaning up his act and wanted to get his daughter back or whatever the hell, and he was doing better, and we can't have that. You can't start taking control over your life again when I'm the one in control of things. So I'm gonna blow your head off with a shotgun.
Well, she was as bad as he was as far as that goes.
Yeah, but I think she was a little bit smarter, and because he was so messed up psychologically, he hated the fame, he hated the fortune, he hated the attention, he never wanted to be a rock star or what the hell ever, and hated being idolized by teenagers that didn't understand him, but he was making millions of dollars. It was all getting shot up his arm and hers. So it's nasty. And it doesn't discriminate. It does not discriminate. You look at famous celebrities, rock stars, musicians, sports stars. It does not discriminate. Who's the I always forget his name, Lamar Odom, married to a Kardashian, played starting forward for the Los Angeles Lakers, got into crack for whatever reason, and then walked away from his tens of millions of dollars contract with the Lakers and is shacked up with this gold-digging bitch, Khloe Kardashian, and instead of her trying to get him help to get him back to playing basketball, well, shit, he was already a multi-gazillionaire from his basketball career. That money will last the rest of our lives. I would rather you be a junkie, be a crackhead, and I'll just run the show. And I'm not saying that's the case in that situation. I don't know Khloe Kardashian. I could be totally wrong, but that's certainly what it looks like, and we've seen it before. It does not discriminate. And just because you have a good life and just because you have a good job and a good family and you think you have it under control, this shit will grab you so tightly by the balls. And by the time you realize that it has you by the balls, it's probably too late.
Yeah, your girlfriend or your wife is sticking a knife in your chest.
That's right. A serrated steak knife. 3 times. But at that point, all you can do is hold on tight and pray to God that you find the strength and the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast to help get you sober.
Did you know there was a CSI episode based on Elliot Smith's story?
No.
Yeah.
Where did you hear that?
A case where someone allegedly stabbed himself in the chest 3 times.
Really?
To commit suicide, and they laid it all out and had to figure out how he did it and how this could possibly be done. And it was an interesting episode. Yeah, check it out.
Well,
hey, it's 11:57.
It is, but we started a few minutes late.
Oh, okay. And we have some
that's all right. I don't want to have too much editing to do, and here's the hard part. I can't add time to the show. Believe me, I've tried. But, so we need to at least get to 2 hours, and preferably not too far beyond that, because editing, I found that what's funny is we tend to, sometimes when we're having a discussion, because we aren't scripted and we don't always know what we're going to talk about, we tend to sometimes have these sort of silence gaps in between our words, which is fine because it adds drama. But for the podcast...
Especially when you're telling a story.
For the podcast...
The tension that you build up, waiting for that epic moment where you're going to tell us what the answer is that we're all waiting for. Oh my God.
But I can trim a couple minutes out of the show just by trimming some of the gaps down, and I can see it in the waveforms too, where it's just like silence. So I just clip it together. Yeah. If you ever listen back to the podcast, there are times where you might realize that, oh, that came a lot faster than I remember it coming. That's what she said. So.
That deserves a soundboard thing.
Did it? The crickets? All right.
No, no, it was a good thing. It was a good one.
So next week.
You know,
Next
I
week.
want to say,
Yeah.
we started this show. We actually had somewhat of a topic, which was predisposition to
Oh yeah.
genetic. But I think we talked for about maybe 5 or 10 minutes at the most. And we were able to carry on an entire show with no real theme, and we just had a good steady stream. So, fuck the topics. I mean, it's good to have something to start with, but you know.
Well, our show is tangential. I think that's fair to say. And we
It's like
we start
life.
with a topic, and we go off on our tangents, and that's fine and good. But we somehow always find our way back to the topic. Not always the most elegant of segue back to the topic, but we find our way back no less. And in this situation, from the predisposition, the genetic predisposition for addiction, I don't know that we landed anywhere.
No, I don't think
Chaz.
so. You know, and there's a big question about predisposition, genetic predisposition to being homosexual. That's
Sure.
another big question.
We talked about that a couple of weeks ago when dipshit Rick Perry decided to compare the two.
Exactly. And I can see it. I can see it in alcohol. I don't know about gay. I mean, if you're gay, be gay. I mean, I don't think you need to prove that you're, you know, genetically predisposed to being gay. Just be gay and be happy. You know. Anybody who
Technically the same
disagrees
thing.
with it, go fuck themselves.
Nah.
Yeah.
It's all about love.
That reminds me, Robinson.
Yes.
I just started. You remember how you and I, over the last week or two, we've felt very cosmically connected?
Yes.
So, unintentionally, I had this undying need to start rewatching the HBO miniseries, HBO Films miniseries from 1996, Angels in America. You and I watched that entire miniseries, which I think is like 12 hours worth of movie.
Yes.
In
Great show.
Incredible. In one sitting, Al Pacino, Meryl Streep, really solid group of actors. James Cromwell.
Binge watching.
So, but that was before binge watching was a thing. I don't even know where we got this Angels in America on DVD from. We had it on DVD. Robinson had it.
No, wait, I thought I remembered, but no, I don't remember. But
Well, we sat down to watch, just not even knowing what it was.
Yeah, Angels in America. It was 2 CDs that someone gave me.
It was like 6 CDs.
Was it 6?
I think so, because it's long. It's quite a few 1-hour chunks, but we watched it together.
That's right.
And we got hooked. And it's all about the 1980s AIDS epidemic and homosexuality in New York City. And it's a really well done miniseries. It's more like a movie. And the cinematography is wonderful, the acting is wonderful, the story is wonderful, and it was something that you and I watched together, and we were very drawn to it. We were very, like, almost emotionally connected to this movie when we watched it for some reason together. And on this tiny little, 13-inch television, sitting on a little couch, watched it for like an entire day. And I started watching it again the other day, and it makes me think of you. And Al Pacino is fucking fantastic in this movie. And if anybody hasn't seen it, worth watching. Absolutely worth watching. If you have nothing on your binge-watching list right now, find it, watch it. Totally good.
Angels in America.
Yep.
Yes. There's another very good show that I love showing to people. It's called The Lost Room. If you haven't seen that, definitely check that out. I just was at a Blockbuster when they were going out of business looking for something to buy, and everything was $1. I got this really, really amazing show. It's a 6-part miniseries, I think 6, and The Lost Room. It's amazing. It's about this guy. He's a cop, and he like busts a kid who has a key to a hotel room. But this key has this strange ability to fit into any lock. And when whatever door you open with this key becomes the hotel room.
Huh.
So no matter what situation you're in, if you're running from someone or whatever, and you open a door, it opens into the hotel room, and when you close the door behind you, the next person to open it, they're just going to get whatever it was, a linen closet or
an empty room.
And then when you leave the room, you can leave to anywhere in the world that you can imagine.
I need to get me one of these keys.
Yeah, and then, great show.
Awesome. The Lost Room. Well, thank you so very much, Chaz and Robinson. Before we go, genetic predisposition to addiction. Does it matter?
No.
Or does it not matter? Chaz?
No.
Doesn't matter. Robinson, does it matter? Does it not matter?
I can't say for sure, but my heart says not really.
I agree with you. My heart says not so much, because that drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, addiction is a bitch, and it doesn't discriminate based on genetics. Neither does homosexuality. So suck it, Rick Perry. This is the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. Thank you so much for watching/listening. We are with you every Saturday night from 10 o'clock to midnight on YouTube, and from 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. on Radio Valencia, 87.9 FM in the San Francisco Bay Area. We will post the podcast. Join us on Facebook. Join us on Twitter. SoberHappyHour@gmail.com. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Thank you very much, your humble hosts. We must leave you now, but if you or yours is considering getting sober, I highly recommend it. As does Robinson. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night.
All right.
I muted the microphone. That was a mistake.
No, that's all right.
That means that the bumper music probably got cut off too. All right, we're really going now. I got to be up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Until next week, Robinson.
Okay. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.